Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
It is Monday, January 19, 2026,
Mm-hmm.
and you should probably put a mental pin in that date because it feels like one of those days we're going to look back on and just say, that was the shift.
It definitely feels like a hinge point, yeah.
I want you to picture the scene. You're scrolling your news feed, you've got your morning coffee, you're looking for, I don't know, sports scores, maybe the weather.
Right.
And instead, you see a headline that just looks like it fell out of a wormhole from the 19th century.
Yeah.
Or maybe a satire site.
It does have a certain absurdity to it at first glance. The United States threatens a trade war with Europe over the purchase of Greenland.
Right. I mean, it sounds like a board game.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to strip away the absurdity and look at the very cold, hard economic reality underneath.
Okay.
We're working off a report from Jamaica Homes News. It's titled, U.S.-EU Tariff Tensions Escalate Over Greenland, Raising Global Trade Risks. And honestly, the mission for this deep dive is to connect two things that seem to have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
Which is usually where the most interesting insights are hiding.
Exactly. We need to figure out how a diplomatic fight over an icy Arctic territory, a place with, more sled dogs than people, how that ends up changing the price of a bag of cement in Kingston.
Or the interest rate on a mortgage in Montego Bay.
Yes.
It's the ultimate butterfly effect. But instead of a butterfly, flapping its wings, it's a superpower slamming a tariff hammer on the table. And those shock waves, they hit the small, open economies like Jamaica the hardest.
So let's start with the what. Because usually when we cover trade wars, it's about something tangible.
Sure, steel cars.
Right, seal dumping or EV subsidies, protecting a factory in Ohio or Stuttgart. But this is a real estate deal. I mean, what exactly is the threat here?
It's an ultimatum. That's really the only word for it. According to the reporting, President Trump has drawn a very bright red line.
Okay.
The U.S. has announced a plan to impose an additional 10% tariff on goods from a specific bloc of European countries. And this isn't a maybe or a sometime next year kind of threat.
No, the date is.
The start date is February 1st, 2026.
Which is barely 2 weeks away. That is incredibly fast for trade policy. Usually, these things have, 6-month review periods.
It's lightning speed. And there is an escalation clause attached that really sharpens the knife. If a deal isn't reached for the U.S. to purchase Greenland, which we have to remind ourselves is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, those tariffs don't just stay at 10%.
They go up.
They jump to 25% by June 1st.
So it's basically sell us the island or pay the tax.
That's it. It's coercive negotiation using trade policy as the lever.
What stood out to me in the report was the target list. You think, okay, if the beef is about Greenland, you just pressure Denmark.
Right, you call Copenhagen.
You call Copenhagen, have a tough conversation, but the blast radius here is way bigger.
Oh, much, much bigger. The source lists a who's who of major European economies. We are not just talking about Denmark.
So who's on the list?
The tariffs target Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, and Great Britain.
Wait, Great Britain is on that list. That's interesting. I mean, considering they aren't even in the EU anymore.
That's a great observation.
It feels like more of a North Atlantic strategy than just an EU strategy.
It's practically a continental standoff. By targeting Germany and France, you're hitting the industrial engines of Europe. By hitting the UK and the Nordics, you're basically encircling the North Sea. It's a massive chunk of global GDP.
And you have to assume Europe isn't just going to take that lying down. I can't imagine Paris or Berlin just saying, okay, sure, here's the check.
Not a chance. I mean, the rhetoric out of Brussels is already sharp. They're calling it coercive economic pressure.
Yeah.
And Euronews is reporting that while the EU officially prefers dialogue, which, is diplomatic code for, please, let's not blow up the global economy, they are actively dusting off their retaliation plans.
I saw that phrase, reactivating previously paused trade countermeasures. That just jumped out at me.
Which is just a very polite way of saying, get ready for a trade war.
You hit my cars, I hit your bourbon.
You hit my cheese, I hit your blue jeans. It spirals.
Okay, before we get down to the Caribbean impact, which is really the meat of this whole thing, I have to stop on the why, because this is the part that trips people up. Why Greenland?
Yeah.
I get that it's big, I get it looks nice on a map, but destroying trade relations with your oldest allies over it, is this really just about buying land?
See, if you view it as just land, like buying a vacation home, it makes no sense at all. But The source alludes to a deeper context. You have to look at what Greenland actually represents in the year 2026.
Okay, so peel that back for us. What is it?
It's not just ice and snow anymore. It's really a trifecta of strategic value.
Gotcha, Fecka.
First, logistics. As the Arctic ice melts, which is happening way faster than predicted, new shipping lanes are opening up.
Right, the Northwest Passage.
Exactly. Control over the Arctic approaches is going to be like controlling the Panama Canal was in the 20th century. It's a strategic pole booth, a shortcut between Asia and the West.
Okay, so that's one. What's two?
Two is military positioning. If you hold Greenland, you just dominate the North Atlantic air and sea space. But the third thing, this is the one that drives the hard economics. Critical minerals.
And we're talking about rare earths.
We are, and we say rare earths a lot in headlines, but we should probably define why they matter so much here. These aren't just random rocks. These are 17 specific elements that are required for, well, almost everything modern.
Right, these are the magnets in EV motors, the
Right.
guidance systems in missiles, the components in your iPhone screen.
Precisely. Neodymium, dysprosium materials you've never heard of, but you interact with every single day. And right now, the supply chain for those it's heavily dominated by China. So both the U.S. and Europe are desperate to secure a supply chain that doesn't run through Beijing. And Greenland. It's believed to sit on some of the largest undeveloped deposits of these minerals in the world.
So this is not a real estate deal. This is a resource security play.
That's the driver.
It's about not getting cut off from the raw materials of the future.
That's why the U.S. is willing to risk a trade war. They view it as a national security imperative, not, a commercial one.
And that makes it so much harder to solve, doesn't it? If we were arguing about the price of aluminum, we could split the difference.
You can negotiate a quota.
But you can't really negotiate half of a sovereignty deal when national security is the driver.
That's the deadlock. Sovereignty, the right of a people to govern themselves, is usually non-negotiable. But national security is also usually non-negotiable. When those two absolute forces slam into each other, you get volatility.
And markets hate volatility.
They hate it.
Which brings us to the pivot, the reason we're here. We're reading Jamaica Homes News. We're thinking about the listener in Kingston or Portmore. Why should they care about Arctic shipping lanes?
It's the question of the hour, right? I'm just trying to build a duplex in Mandeville. Why am I sweating a fight between Washington and Brussels?
It just feels worlds away.
It does. But in a globalized economy, there's no away. Small, open economies like Jamaica are what economists call price takers.
Meaning they don't set the global prices?
They don't set the global price of steel or oil or money. They take the price the world gives them. They're small boats on a very big ocean.
And when the two biggest ocean liners, the U.S. and the EU, start colliding, it creates waves that rock those small boats violently.
And the source breaks this down into three very specific waves: the stuff, the money, and let's call it the vibes.
I like that framework. Okay, let's start with the stuff,
Yeah.
the construction inputs.
Okay, think about a construction site in Jamaica. Just look at the materials: the steel reinforcement bars, the bathroom fixtures, the heavy machinery, the glass for the window.
Almost all imported.
A massive percentage of it is. Jamaica isn't smelting its own steel beams for high-rises. It's all coming in on a ship.
Right. So you might say, well, if the tariff is on French cheese, why does that make my steel more expensive?
That's the trap. Because global trade is a network, not a series of straight lines. When you disrupt a major node like the North Atlantic, everything has to reroute. Insurance premiums for freight go up globally.
Why? Because the ocean is suddenly more dangerous.
Because the financial risk of the voyage is higher. If a trade war breaks out, customs inspections take longer, ships get delayed. Insurers hate that, so they charge more. Logistics companies hike their prices.
So the frictional cost of moving anything, anywhere, just goes up.
Precisely. It's like throwing sand in the gears of the global supply chain. Plus, you have the inflation angle. If the U.S. puts a tariff on European goods, U.S. domestic prices might rise. And since the U.S. is Jamaica's biggest trading partner...
Jamaica ends up importing that U.S. inflation.
Exactly. So for the developer in Jamaica, this shows up as what? A revised invoice from their supplier.
A text message saying, hey, that quote I gave you, it's gone.
New price is 15% higher. Or the timeline for the windows delayed 6 weeks because the container got bumped.
And margins in construction are already razor thin.
If you're working on a 10% margin and your materials cost spikes by 12%, your profit just evaporated. You're building at a loss.
Okay, that's the physical headache. Now let's talk about the invisible one, the money. The report talks about risk pricing. This feels like the most dangerous part for the average person.
It is, because it hits everyone, not just builders. So here's the mechanism. When the world gets scary, big global investors get nervous. They stop looking for growth, and they start looking for safety. We call this a risk-off environment.
They want to put their money under the mattress.
The institutional equivalent, yes.
Right.
They buy U.S. treasuries or gold. They pull capital out of emerging markets or smaller economies because they see them as riskier.
So money literally leaves places like the Caribbean.
It flows out, or, and this is key, it demands a higher price to stay. This tightens financial conditions, which is just a fancy economist word for it gets more expensive to borrow money.
So walk me through it. I walk into a bank in Kingston to get a mortgage. How does this impact me?
Okay, so the bank's cost of funds, the rate they have to pay to get money, is tied to these global rates. If global risk perception goes up, the interest rate the bank has to pay goes up, and they do not eat that cost.
They pass it straight to you.
Straight to you. So even if the Jamaican economy is doing fine, even if local employment is up, your mortgage rate could jump just because investors in New York are nervous about Greenland.
Wow. That is the harsh reality.
You could have perfect credit, a great job, a solid down payment, but the bank says, sorry, rates just moved 75 basis points because of the global outlook.
That is what we mean by price taker. You're taking the global price of money.
And for housing affordability, that is a killer. A 1% rise in rates can knock a huge chunk of buyers out of the market.
And there's that third layer here the article mentions, the psychological one. The vibes, as we called it.
Confidence, yeah.
Specifically regarding the diaspora.
This is huge for markets like Jamaica.
It's a massive driver of the real estate market. It's not just the local worker. It's the Jamaican living in London or Toronto or New York.
The person sending remittances or planning to retire back home? Right. So imagine you are that person living in London. You're seeing headlines about trade wars. Maybe the UK economy is taking a hit. Remember, the UK is on the target list. You start worrying about your own job security there.
Are you going to sign a contract to buy a condo in Kingston today?
Probably not. You wait. You turtle up.
You wait and see.
And wait and see is the enemy of real estate. When buyers hesitate, transaction volume drops. When volume drops, nobody knows what the real price of the house is anymore. Valuation becomes a guessing game.
And developers, seeing that hesitation?
They hit the brakes. They don't launch phase 2 because the pre-sales aren't there, so you get a slowdown that just feeds on itself.
So it's an accumulation, higher material costs, higher mortgage rates,
Yeah.
and hesitant buyers.
Yeah.
There's a rough trifecta.
The source warns about exactly this. It says the market won't necessarily crash overnight. It's not a bubble popping. It's a squeeze. A slow, grinding squeeze on affordability.
Okay, we've got the diagnosis. Let's look for the symptoms. We're sitting here on January 19th. February 1st is D-Day. What should a savvy listener be watching for?
The source outlines 3 specific signals. If you want to know how bad this is going to get, don't just read the headlines. Watch these 3 things.
Signal number 1.
Execution. Does the 10% tariff actually happen on February 1st? Sometimes these threats are just, a bluff, a negotiation tactic.
So if we wake up February 2nd and goods are still moving freely, maybe we can breathe a sigh of relief.
Maybe. But if the tariffs hit, and crucially, if that threat of the jump to 25% in June stays on the table, that's the signal that they're digging in for a long siege.
Okay. Signal number 2.
The European response. This is critical. Do they go for a staged response or immediate countermeasures?
What's the difference, effectively?
A staged response is diplomatic. It's slow. It implies, we'll review this and maybe apply tariffs in 3 months. It buys time for talk. Immediate countermeasures is a slapback. It's instant retaliation.
And instant retaliation means escalation.
It means the spiral begins. If you see headlines about the EU slapping tariffs on U.S. bourbon or Harley-Davidsons on February 2nd, brace yourself. The fight is on.
And the third signal.
Scope creep. This is the scary one. Does this dispute stay about trade or does it bleed into security?
How would that happen?
Well, these are NATO allies. We're talking defense treaties. If the U.S. starts linking the Greenland purchase to NATO funding, or if the EU starts threatening to withhold security cooperation, then the firewall is gone.
That's when the rulebook goes out the window.
And for a country like Jamaica, or really any neutral observer, you want those lanes to stay separate. When they blur, the global order gets very shaky very fast.
It feels like we're entering a period where the old assumptions just, they don't hold. We used to think of real estate as hyper-local.
Location, location, location.
Right.
That's still true, but now you have to add a 4th location, your geopolitical location. In 2026, real estate is an asset class that floats on global flows of money and materials. You can't just watch the local news anymore.
You have to watch the horizon.
And you have to understand that volatility is the new normal. If you're a developer, you need bigger buffers. If you're a buyer, you need to stress test your mortgage. Can you afford it if rates go up another %? You can't assume anything anymore.
It is wild that we started this conversation talking about buying a country.
Yeah.
And we ended up analyzing the grit of the construction market.
It just proves the point, though. There is no such thing as an isolated event anymore.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you touched on. The idea of buying Greenland. It feels so archaic.
It does, but I want to leave the listener with a thought about that. We live in a world of resource scarcity now. Rare earths are the new gold. Are we maybe seeing a return to an era where territory is treated purely as a commercial asset again?
Like the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
Or buying Alaska from the Russians.
Exactly. For the last 80 years or so, we thought borders were settled by history, by culture. But if geopolitical stability is just the price of doing business, what happens when the world's biggest powers decide to renegotiate the rent?
If territory is back on the market, then sovereignty becomes a commodity.
And for smaller nations, that is a very provocative and perhaps unsettling question to ponder.
Definitely something to chew on while you check those mortgage rates. From Arctic tensions to tropical markets, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious.